Hello and welcome to another UK column interview. My name's Debbie Evans and I'm a trained nurse. And this is going to be part two of gut feeling, because in part one, I was delighted to be joined by our great friend, Cheryl Granger, who's an independent pharmaceutical training consultant, and Dr. Sabine Hazan, consultant gastroenterologist, all the way over in the United States of America. And she was telling us in part one, save the biff. And if you don't know what we mean by that, please go back and watch part one of our interview because you will find it fascinating. In this interview, we're going to be concentrating a little bit more about Dr. Hazan's journey, really, during COVID and what alerted her, what gave her red flags and her journey. So without further ado, let me first of all say welcome back to Cheryl and thank you so much for joining us. Welcome back, Cheryl.
Thanks, Debbie, and hello, Sabine.
And let's welcome Sabine on screen. Sabine, thank you so much for agreeing to join us again. And as you've said, and as we've said, the gut is a very big organ and needs lots of discussion. Welcome back.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
So I think if you haven't watched part one, please do. Because I think to start off part two, Sabine has been very, very vocal and sacrificed pretty much everything to tell the truth and to speak as she finds and to make sure that her research hasn't been interfered with. And she's spoken at Senate and very, very powerful. And we've got a little bit of video just to give you an idea of Dr. Sabine Hazan talking to Senate. Have a look at this.
Pharmaceuticals companies are captured by the price of the stock. Venture capitalists own pharmaceutical companies. They own the CRO, the clinical research organizations. They own the site. They own the institutional review board. They own the advertising, the marketing. They influence through the media. And what we saw this pandemic was the price of the stock mattered more than the price of a life.
That is so powerful. And I have to say, when we saw you, or when I watched you say that with venture capitalists, I immediately thought back to, in the United Kingdom, Dame Kate Bingham ran our COVID vaccination, the whole operation, basically. And she was picked to do that because she was a venture capitalist. She knew nothing about vaccines. She knew nothing about clinical trials. But she was a venture capitalist. So everything that you said there really rang home with me. But I want to ask you what it meant for you to find an effective therapeutic, because you found an effective therapeutic, a protocol for people that were coming to see you with COVID. And it was accepted at first, wasn't it? And then it kind of wasn't accepted. Can you explain to us your protocol, how you came about finding it? And you even went to the FDA, you got it all put through, and then what happened?
The idea of the protocol kind of came from the experience of treating C. diff. So C. diff, I'll take you back, is a bacteria that people get from taking antibiotics, and it kills the microbiome. And essentially, this bacteria just starts taking over the gut and secretes toxins. The idea of treating C. diff is really to kill it first, kill the whole gut. And then if you don't, what we learned from killing it with antibiotics is that it kills the bacteria, but then it has a chance of coming back. So that's why the idea of implanting new microbes, to help with C. diff was really the answer. So with COVID, because we didn't have access to implantation, obviously, but I knew that, COVID is a virus that probably is going to be in the stools. And therefore, how do we fight this virus in the stools? How do we get rid of it? And so my idea was we need something that kills the virus, and we need something, and that kills it fast. And we need something that increases the microbiome, right? So that was the beginning, right? It was looking at COVID in the stools, finding COVID in the stools, really serendipitously noticing that One patient was on high dosages of vitamin C and his COVID disappeared. And then another patient was on high dosages, had taken some hydroxychloroquine, Z-Pak, and his virus disappeared in 5 to 10 days. So really that realization that you have a virus present and then it's no longer there in the stools is really the realization that, hey, maybe this is a right protocol, right? So why hydroxychloroquine? Well, hydroxychloroquine has a property where it changes the pH of the cell to make it alkaline. So remember, the virus sits on the ACE2 receptors, and then the virus penetrates the cell from the ACE2 receptor. If the milieu is alkaline, then the virus gets destroyed, in the cells. And that's really your first step, right? Catch as early as possible, give a little bit of hydroxychloroquine to kind of change the environment in the cells, and then get rid of the virus. That was the beginning thought process. Z-Pak was just another, added antimicrobial to kill off the membrane of the virus. Zinc was used to basically block the virus from entering the ACE2 receptors. Zinc is actually great at blocking, at sitting on the ACE2, at blocking virus penetration. And then vitamin C and vitamin D was used to increase the microbiome, the bifidobacteria, which in my mind was probably the way to get rid of the cytokines, get rid of the virus, get it out from your stools. What I was noticing with a lot of patients on the front line is, a lot of people started feeling a lot better when they started having diarrhea. And you've probably had that common cold, and then all of a sudden you have diarrhea and you're like, wow, I feel better. I'm breathing. I'm not coughing anymore. So really that evacuation, gave me an idea that possibly the bifidobacteria helped in taking that virus and just swallowing it up. Bifidobacteria is, this bacteria is much bigger than a virus. It's 20 times bigger than a virus, right? So viruses are very tiny. So if you increase those microbes, and, you have to think of your colon as a property and, like an apartment. And if you put in, a lot of people in an apartment, that apartment is stuck, right? So it's like, think about this colon and you're sticking some bacteria and you're filling the space with the bacteria. There's no way for viruses to penetrate if you've got solid microbes that are, your bowel movement or your poop, right? So really that was kind of, the idea for me. How do I improve the microbiome without necessarily doing a fecal transplant? How do I refloralize the gut in a term that I coined? The refloralization process is really reintroducing microbes into the gut that have been lost without needing fecal transplant. So that was how the concept kind of came on with hydroxy. What I noticed with hydroxy Z-Pak is that it did kill the bifidobacteria and the microbiome. So it was not a really great solution for the young people and the healthy people because it took a long time to regenerate that bifidobacteria. So the ivermectin doxycycline zinc protocol, which was a protocol that Dr. Barodi, my partner in this, started thinking about. When he said to me ivermectin, I wasn't really, I knew ivermectin with scabies. I knew ivermectin, we were talking about ivermectin in April of 2020. When we were talking about it, I was already writing the protocol with hydroxy, Z-Pak, vitamin C, D, and zinc. And then, he kept saying, no, I'm telling you, ivermectin, look at the studies from this, look at the study from that. And then I looked at ivermectin and I noticed that it comes from a bacteria that is similar to bifidobacteria. Sorry, coffee does this to me. So when this happened, I basically said, there's something to ivermectin. And then the idea of ivermectin doxy zinc came on later.
So just for everybody in the UK, the Z-Pak is azathioprine. So that is the antibiotic that you were using, which I think Pfizer make, and Pfizer are now reducing the availability of that, if I'm right, because I think they've got a new antibiotic coming out. But you took out a patent on your protocol, didn't you? So do you want to tell us a bit about why that was done and what you did with it?
I took out a patent with it because I felt, well, I'm doing the research and I'm submitting the protocol to the FDA and I want to develop a product out of it, kind of like, products people have developed in the past for H. pylori. So I thought it was a combination treatment. That would be a good idea. I spent a lot of money on that patent. I also did it because if I was going to do the research, as a woman, and you can all appreciate this, our research doesn't really, see the light of day. We really have to push as women to be heard in science, especially. There's always someone copying the research and then making a name for themselves with your research. So I didn't want that to happen. I kind of wanted to showcase that there was a woman behind all this. When I saw that the hydroxychloroquine, azithromycin, zinc, vitamin C, D, and zinc was not that great for the young people, I didn't feel it was a great product to kind of monetize on or to even like bring to market, really. So in a way, I spent a lot of money in a patent. I was offered a lot of money for this patent, by the way. And I refused it because I said, I want to see the data. I want to see that it's working. What I came to discover during the pandemic was that it was not really about a product. It was about the art of medicine. It was really about looking at your patient and saying, okay, well, this guy probably has loss of bifidobacteria. So I'm going to give him quick, and he's desaturating, losing his oxygen. So I'm going to go quickly with hydroxy. And I'm going to add ivermectin to increase the saturation because I had noticed that ivermectin increased saturation in some other patients. So you kind of like use everything you've got, right? When you're on the front line, you see the patient crouching and you go, okay, I'm going to hit it with hydroxy. I'm going to give it some Z-Pak, azithromycin. I'm going to give some ivermectin, with a fatty meal. I'm going to give vitamin C. I'm going to give vitamin D. I'm going to give zinc. And then you watch your patient turn around. So it really was the art of medicine. At that point, I didn't, I felt like this is no, and here's the problem. It was no longer about a patent or a product. Research was interfered with. My voice was I was no longer allowed to do a clinical trial the right way. I was no longer allowed to advertise on Facebook or Instagram. So when that happens, there's something else going on. So you're not going to spend money developing a product when this is not about the product. This is not about science. This is no longer about research, right? This is about corruption. Somebody is playing, the way of this, of this pandemic. Somebody is leading this pandemic. And it's not necessarily about the virus. And it's not necessarily about the treatment or the vaccine. It's somebody is directing the narrative in their way that they want to direct it. Okay. So I personally think, and you can see the narrative, changing a little bit, when they started talking about the vaccine injured. Now you start going, well, are they trying to use the vaccination to create chaos again, to make people panic, to blame, a political candidate? You could see the narrative. This is all this whole pandemic, all this about viruses and everything. Once you put healthcare in the limelight and it becomes about the price of a stock, then you've lost healthcare. That's it. And here's the problem. Now the venture capitalists are my patients. So good luck finding good poop for them to fix them, right? So, and we've stopped science and we've stopped research. So what are we going to do? Yes, there's a lot of hypotheses out there. I have a lot of cancer patients right now that were venture capitalists. And there's a lot of hypotheses out there that are saying, well, fenbendazole and ivermectin and all these drugs, right? But here's the thing. There's no data. Nobody's writing the papers. Nobody's doing the research. Who's going to help them? Everybody is censored. The one thing about the pandemic is there were a few doctors that stepped up and were courageous enough and brave enough to treat. What's going to happen the next pandemic? You think those people are going to line up? No way. No way. I know myself. My ark is built. Noah's Ark. That's it. Me with my microbes. We're at a time in humanity, if we don't change what is going on right now, and we don't stop the interference of research and the interference of medicine, we have lost humanity. Bifidobacteria, in the last 1,000 stool samples that I've analyzed, less than 5% have bifidobacteria in their gut. Now, tell me, how does a mom who is breastfeeding her baby or supposed to pass her bifidobacteria to her newborn, how is she supposed to do that when she's lost her own bifidobacteria? And is that the reason that we have an increased rate of autism in the world? Because of the fact that we're killing the bifidobacteria. So yes, my platform, here's my t-shirt, Save the Biff, It's all about that. This was the big revelation in this pandemic. We are killing the planet. We are killing humanity. We are killing the microbiome. Ask why we have more Alzheimer's, more cancer, more disease. You're killing the microbiome. You're killing our food supply. You're killing our animals. Our air is not pure. Our foods are full of pesticides. Our stress levels is through the roof. We are all addicted on these little, devices that has our brain captured. And we're not living. We're not living. What's the point of being a human if your own interaction is with a little device instead of going outside and playing in the garden and meeting people and having, a life and interaction? There's no humanity. You're just a bunch of robots. And by the way, robots are coming down, because humanity let it. We need to step it up as humans and say, we demand more from our government. That's it. I'm very passionate about this.
Well, I think very well said. And I want to ask you too, because, we talked in part one a lot about bifidobacteria, and we're coming back again to bifidobacteria now. And, I want to ask you the importance or what you've seen actually with maybe couples or people that that some have got more bifidobacteria than others. Do you think it's about kids playing in the dirt and climbing trees and, being out in a natural environment? Do you think we've become too clean a society where everybody's using hand sanitizer and not allowing kids to go out and get dirty? Do you think that's having an effect on bifidobacteria?
I think we've taken the sterility path a little bit too far. I think we've over-sterilized. I think we're overdoing it. Think about during the pandemic, you're washing your hands with alcohol constantly. What is that doing? Is that alcohol penetrating your skin? Is it going to the blood vessels? Is it going to your colon? Is it destroying your gut? We've become an over-sterilized population. And I think because of that, yes, we are killing microbes. If you look at the population of the Amazon jungle versus the population of America, they have a lot of phylum of microbes that exist in them, in their guts. They have phylums that we've never even seen in America, right? We barely have 3 or 4 in our guts. So what happened to the other 8 that have disappeared? Even myself, I was raised in Morocco. I'm sure when I went from Morocco to Canada to America, I'm sure I've diluted my microbiome because I went back to visit Morocco. I couldn't eat some of the foods over there without having, a bacteria. I ended up getting E. coli in Morocco. I'm sure when I was young, I survived that E. coli because I lived in the environment. I was part of that environment. But then I come here and I'm completely diluted. I've been given, I'm sure, a lot of antibiotics in my life. I've been given, a lot of vaccinations through training, etc. I'm sure through my life that has, diluted my microbiome to where it's at now. Now, luckily, it's not diluted too much, but it is still diluted to the point that I, had, a bacteria in Morocco that I probably would have survived as a kid.
Yeah, and it's all very interesting. I mean, I would like to go on to antimicrobial resistance in a moment. I'm sure Debbie will be thinking that's where she wants to go too. But just to talk about children very quickly first. I mean, I think you've said in your book that by the time they get to this is going back when they were being treated with mums that hadn't been vaccinated and the rest, that they took till 2.5 years to actually have a biome that was then the equivalent of an adult. And we know from all the vaccines that they're given in the first few months of life, that's a critical point for the development of the brain and your immunity. And then all these vaccines are going in as well. So it's what hope do we have with our children and what we're doing to their immunity? Nobody talks about natural immunity anymore.
Exposing a kid to a piece of a microbe that resembles the microbe is also triggering an immune response, right? That's the whole point of the vaccine to begin with, right? The problem is, again, we've gone too far, right? So, and we're doing too many. So that's the big problem. The big problem is, where do you stop? Where do you draw the line? Where do you say, you know what? Maybe I don't need to give a hepatitis B shot in a newborn. Maybe I should wait till the kid is like sexually active, or at least having hormones or periods. You know what I mean? So I think we've gone too far. I think we're overdoing it. I'm looking at, first of all, viruses, in my opinion, should not have a vaccine. Okay. This is just my opinion. Take it or leave it. But a virus that mutates, and that's what happened with COVID, the virus is mutating, every 3 months or every month, probably it's a new strain. We've been following the strains of these viruses since the beginning of the pandemic. And I can tell you, it's not about the strain that matters. It's about what's in your gut that matters. That paper is coming out. Like, we've been analyzing every single strain from Delta to pangolin to everyone. And basically what we notice, it's not about the strain. The strain doesn't matter. It's about what's in your gut to survive COVID. And here's the other thing. The strain changes. It's the same in one family and then it's different in another family down the street. So if a strain changes, if there's a mutation in the spike protein, how are you going to keep catching? And I've said this before, a vaccine is basically, to put it in layman's term, is a sequence. ABC needs to match ABC of the bug, okay? So if ABC matches ABC, then you're fine. You've got some immunity because it recognizes. It's a piece of the bug that it's recognizing, okay? When ABC changes to AFG, and when the virus or changes to AFG and you're still giving ABC, it's not going to work no matter how you do it. So, and you're never going to catch up on the new strains. That's the problem. So you should not be vaccinating against viruses. You should be building the immunity. You should be building the microbiome, the bacteria, right? That's the mistake we've made, because what happens is we're making these viruses stronger or weaker. And we've seen that with HPV, right? HPV vaccine came along, but now we still have cervical cancer with different strains of the HPV because it's a virus. You can't vaccinate against a virus. Same thing with herpes. We've not been able to vaccinate against herpes. We can't. It's constantly mutating. So, and it mutates at different regions. So, depending on the region you picked as your vaccine, it's not going to work. And we've seen that with COVID. It didn't work because we still have COVID. The number one reason for a vaccine is to prevent you from having the disease. The vaccine is supposed to protect you, right? Think of diphtheria, think of smallpox. It's supposed to protect you, right? When you start developing the bacteria or the virus, then the vaccine didn't work.
All the licenses say that they will prevent the infection on all the vaccines for COVID, and they've broken it. It hasn't worked.
There were so many lies in this pandemic, so many lies, and so much corruption to trick the consumer, from, hey, eat a French fry and get a vaccine, eat a donut and get a vaccine. Since when do we encourage people to eat donuts and French fries? I mean, what planet am I living that healthcare has completely turned around, that we're recommending French fries and donuts? I mean, that was a devious marketing ploy. That basically a way to kind of like, divide the people that are critical thinkers from those that are not.
I want to come in on that as well, because you're absolutely right. Why would you offer somebody all this rubbish food? And similarly here, we were being told the population was being told to take a vaccine to protect the NHS, to protect your neighbour, your mum, the person. I mean, since when did anybody take a vaccine to protect somebody else, right? It's crazy. But one thing that I did want our viewers and listeners to know is that you are a very, very experienced doctor, a consultant, and you've got labs. You've been involved for years and years and years with clinical trials, with vaccines. This whole world to you is not strange. It's your world. And yet you've already you've encountered some pushback, haven't you, from the FDA? Because, you've spoken to the FDA, you're well versed in how they work. What's the relationship now? Because you brought out these protocols and they worked, right? They worked. And yet all of a sudden they were withdrawn. And we saw, President Trump standing there talking about hydroxy, talking about protocols. And you were the first doctor to bring out these protocols. So what happened with the FDA? Can you explain to us a bit your relationship with the FDA?
Well, remember, it's all about the price of a stock, right? So if the drug, you cannot make more than $300 or $600, and you have a chance to make $1,000 with a new drug like Paxlovid, which is a new unknown. Now, here's the thing. Most people don't realize that when people innovate drugs, there are compounds in these drugs that you have no idea what's in the compound, right? So in other words, a biologic, well, how is it made? How do we get to have a biologic, right? How is it made in the lab, etc.? There's a secrecy there that protects the compound so it doesn't get recreated, right? And then somebody creates a patent, and then the patent goes in, and then essentially the product goes into market. I could have easily called hydroxychloroquine Z-Pak, just Haze D-Pak, and nobody would have known what's in there. I could have easily called ivermectin, doxycycline, zinc, Zyverdox, and nobody would have even thought about it. And I would have probably gotten investors, and I probably would have had a price of a stock on that product, right? However, that was not my intent. My intent was to try to save as many lives as possible and also wake up the public to what's going on in my, because of my experience. I feel that we have, we've paid attention too much to the price of the stock. I've been doing research for 30 years now, and I've seen amazing products that have never gotten to market. And I've seen disaster products that have gone to market. We have a problem right now. We have a problem. And if we don't address this problem and we don't address doing the research properly and bringing these products, to market, we're not going to advance science and medicine. And unfortunately, it is biased by somebody that is controlling the price of that stock. And so when you look at my products, unfortunately, it was not a product that you could raise a price of a stock on. It was not a product that anybody wanted to invest in except me and Dr. Barodi, because we felt, well, this is the answer. I've lost no one during the pandemic, and I'm going to repeat that. I did the clinical trials, and no one died from any of the patients that we enrolled during the pandemic. So, there's a problem there. Now, as far as the FDA, well, the FDA knows, I've done hundreds of clinical trials, not only me, but my sisters have done hundreds of clinical trials. My second sister is the one that brought ivermectin to the market and Harvoni to the market. We have storage of data in our storage containers on all these clinical trials we've done over the years. So the FDA can really come all of a sudden, for 30 years, at least in the last 14 years where I've been investigated, never had a problem with the FDA. All of a sudden, I do a clinical trial on ivermectin, doxycycline, and I actually showed it to them because I was so proud during the pandemic to show them the success of this trial. they realized that I didn't submit a form to the FDA on time and to the IRB on time. And basically we got dinged a 483 for not submitting a form. How are you thinking of submitting forms when you're treating 52 patients a day and you're busy on the front line, and not sleeping at night because people are desaturating and there's no money in these clinical trials, and you're basically spending the money to do these clinical trials. Every patient cost me $3,500 to treat. And then when we saw the corruption, we said, well, you know what, we're done with the trials. So what happened with those trials is it was, really frustration, lack of funding to continue them. We did finish the ivermectin, doxycycline, zinc. That data is going to come out after the election because I'm tired. I'm tired of the politics influencing my treatment. I'm tired of the bullying. I'm tired of the censorship. I need to protect my microbiome as well. I need to be there for my family. I need to be alive, So guess what? They want this. This is what they get. So when venture capitalists are becoming the patients, good luck. I don't know who you're going to go to. Maybe go to your pharma. Maybe go to Bill Gates. He seems to have all the answers. Maybe he'll treat your Alzheimer's or your cancer. Go to your politician. Maybe they'll treat you. But, I think there's as much as you can hear this frustration in my voice, and I'm kind of almost like the last one standing in a way. There's thousands of doctors that share my feeling, but don't have the guts or not guts, but like have a fear of stepping up and saying something. We're seeing some coming out little by little, but it's a shame that there's not more doctors showing their frustrations. You see the frustration in medicine with the high suicidal rates in doctors. You see the frustrations with doctors quitting medicine. You see the frustration when they don't want to treat. They're like, you know what? It's not worth the headache. Yes, give the vaccine like the government wants me to do. People have lost the strength and the courage to speak up. And they need to speak up. This is the time to speak up. So that's all I have to say on this. If anything, if I'm just a messenger to raise that courage in people, if I was just a messenger to say, hey, you're going to be fine. If I was just a messenger to hold a person's hand so they could survive and show the data that nobody died on my shift, then be it. That's all I was. I'm good with that. I can sleep at night. I can die in peace and saying, you know what, I've done my job. God is looking at me and saying, good job. I'm a warrior and I'll always be a warrior. So that's it. But others need to be warriors. We need strength. We need courage.
I absolutely love that because I think most people that are watching this interview, they will see that you're a warrior. And I think we're all warriors and we've come this far all together. We're still sane. We're still seeing the agenda. So I think, sometimes we need to take a pat on the back and say, look, we've made it this far. And I've got my eye on the clock because I know you've got clinic to go to, and I know Cheryl wants to come in with something else. But Cheryl did mention earlier antibiotic resistance and antimicrobial resistance, and it's something that we've been talking about at UK Column an awful lot in the last probably a couple of years. We have Dame Sally Davis, who's the UK. We have our own envoy, would you believe, in antimicrobial resistance. And we're told that that is going to kill more people than climate change. I mean, this is what is being made of it. And we know that, I know for sure, having been on antibiotics many times in my life, that it does destroy the gut biome. And many people might actually think back and, actually, yes, we ended up with Candida albicans, thrush, as a result of taking antibiotics. So we've got two things, as I can see, coming up, and that's number one, antimicrobial resistance as a big agenda moving forward. And the other thing that I was concerned about, and I wanted to ask your opinion very quickly on, is catastrophic contagion, which was the last tabletop exercise to be conducted, or one of the last ones to be conducted by the Johns Hopkins University. It was a Bill Gates study, and it's looking at an enteric virus or an enteric sickness coming next. And the enteric sickness, i.e. tummy, vomiting, diarrhea, nausea, etc., as attacking young people. And I just wanted to mention it to you and to say, what are your thoughts surrounding they're predicting that for 2025. I mean, everything's up in the air right now, but it seems as though after attacking the heart, the immune system, which we know is the gut, the brain, all of a sudden now there seems to be a concerted attack on the gut. Would you agree with that?
Because they figured, unfortunately, it's a sick agenda, I think, of following a bunch of people that have a vision of what the world is or should be. And, we're living in a different climate right now than in the past, in that everything is social media driven, and that gives power to some people, and everything is monetary. You can buy almost anything you want. You could buy fame, you could buy, power, you could buy, health. So they think, I think there's a sinister agenda going on. However we look at it, and it's not an agenda that's humble. It's not an agenda that's science. It's an agenda that's all about killing, destroying. That's all we've known as men, is wars and killing. The microbiome is exactly that it's demonstrating that it's not about killing the bug. It's about suppressing it. It's not about kill C. diff. It's about bringing back the families that you've killed to give a diverse microbiome to sustain health, and a diverse microbiome of good bugs and bad bugs, right? So the planet is very dark right now. Humanity is very dark. We're all seeing darkness. We need to start focusing on the light, and we need to start helping each other, community by community. And I think that's when, peace comes back into the planet, in my opinion, and into the microbiome, because that's what it's all about. Peace of the microbiome to allow it to grow, right? Think about that garden I was talking about. If you have a garden full of weeds, you remove the weeds, you plant new seeds, and you let it grow with sun and water. If a tornado comes around, if chaos comes around, if people come in with their shovels and start turning the ground again, you're never going to grow that garden, right? So you need peace in the earth. You need peace in the microbiome of humans, because what we consume, whether we consume foods that are, bad for our guts, anything we consume goes into our bowels and then goes into the earth, into the planet. So imagine, and by the way, I'm going to leave you with this. Bifidobacteria decomposes plastic. Bifidobacteria decomposes plastic. I'm going to say it again. So imagine, is there a climate problem, or is there a loss of bifidobacteria problem? Because is there a loss of bifidobacteria in Alaska, and that's why the iceberg is melting? And is there an overabundance of bifidobacteria in Argentina, and that's why the iceberg is growing over there? We have to start looking at the microbiome of the planet as a whole and humanity as a whole. It's a mistake to just think, oh, well, I'm just going to look at the microbiome of this person, this disease. You have to look at it as a whole. If I'm seeing in my lab less than 5% bifidobacteria in 1,000 patients, that's a direct decrease of bifidobacteria in the planet, okay? And that's a problem, because eventually that can destroy the planet. That can destroy humanity. If we depend on bifidobacteria and we're no longer able to and mothers are not able to transmit it to their children because they have a lack of bifidobacteria themselves, and then on top of that, we add a bunch of stuff to the kids, antibiotics and 72 vaccines and stress of the mom because she has to do 3 jobs to maintain the lifestyle that she's trying to maintain and pay this little device on a monthly basis, this is a lot of stressors for new moms and the new generations of newborns. We are going to have a decrease in fertility in the future. We are going to have an increase in autism in the future. I predict it's going to be 1-on-1, maybe in about 20 to 30 years. So if we don't stop, so we got to stop what we're doing, and we got to analyze, and we got to look back and say, what are we doing? I don't care if it's Bill Gates or whoever, they have children, they have grandchildren, they should be concerned because no human can just live alone on the planet. Humans need other humans. We are part of an ecosystem that requires every race to live together and to do what they're supposed to be doing. Race, gender, men and women are different. There's a reason we're different. We bring something else to the planet. That's why we're giving. That's why we're able to give birth. That's why we're able to have children, because we're able to multitask as women. We're able to take care of the house and the kid and pay the bills and work, etc. That's what we are programmed to do, right? I think the mistake we do is when we say, oh, you know what? The woman's job is no longer important. It's no longer valued. A race can just be, vanish. We don't like this race or this religion. We should just remove it, right? Wrong, because when you remove that race was contributing to the overall humanity, much like in the microbiome. If you remove a group of microbes, you're no longer absorbing sugar. You're removing another group of microbes, you're no longer absorbing dairy, calcium. So guess what? How are you going to function? How is the human going to function without those two groups of microbes when they can't absorb calcium or sugar? Good luck with your mitochondria. Good luck with your Krebs cycle. Good luck waking up in the morning. So these are the microbes we're talking about, right? So eradicating groups of microbes is not a good idea because together, all these microbes make a healthy human. Much like on a bigger picture, humanity survives because of all of us being different and bringing something to the planet. When we think that we just need to decrease or kill somebody that we don't like, we are killing ourselves. It's going to come back to us. So the idea of killing the bug is wrong. It's like getting into wars with people and like kill. It's not about killing. It's about increasing the peace.
Wow. I would just want to thank you so much. And before we let you go with your last word, I just want to bring Cheryl back in very quickly just to ask her if there's anything that she would like to end and ask you before we let you go.
I mean, what I'd like to say is that in this country, with the NHS, that we're all tied into, they want us to do poo samples so that they can tell us we've got cancer because they're expecting 1 in 2 of us to have cancer. And all they're testing the poo for is that. Just think how different it'd be if I could send in a poo sample, which I would do if they told me what my microbiome was, what state it was in, so that I could try and do something about it. I haven't got a clue what my microbiome's like, and I'd like to know. But I don't want to send in a poo sample for them to tell me I've got cancer. I want to be able to build up my immunity so I won't get cancer. And that's really my parting shot. I mean, that's the thing that's wrong with our NHS.
Yeah, it certainly is. And we certainly are getting envelopes through the doors with bowel tests only to give us bad news, not to give us the solutions, not to give us any hope for the future. But you certainly do give us hope for the future because, as you've said, you're a warrior and you can sleep at night because you're standing up for humanity. Actually, I would say you're standing up for creation and you're certainly standing up for bifidobacteria. And if anybody hasn't heard of bifidobacteria by the end of these 2 interviews, where have you been? But I just want to thank you so much and to leave you, as we always do, Dr. Sabine Hazan, and I'm sure we'll be in contact again very soon, but to leave you with the last word. It's over to you.
Well, thank you. And again, thank you for having me again. Lovely to talk to you too. And I just, I guess the last word is you have a choice. You have the freedom to choose whether to abide or not, to say yes to the stool test or not. So I encourage everyone to use your right to informed consent because that's what we have. We are, through the centuries, people have fought for freedom. This is what we're fighting for: freedom to speak, freedom to choose whether we do a test or not. If that test is aggravating your mental status and you don't want to know the results, then that's your freedom, right? You have a life. You should choose whether quality versus quantity. It's your freedom to choose. So that's my last word is freedom of choice. May we fight for that freedom. May we continue to fight for that freedom to speak and to choose what we put in our bodies. And yes, save the BIF.